I associate your music with freshness. It has this very lively approach, very modern, very loving life. Please tell us about your attitude to music that is incorporated in the way you play.
Oh, well, thank you very much. That's a nice compliment. I mean, I've been influenced by a lot of different music over the years. I grew up listening to jazz, because of my parents, really. My mother and father are big jazz fans. So, I listened to the music that they grew up with, and a lot of big band music. And when I was a kid, and then I grew up, in the 1970s and 80s listening to the radio. So, I liked all kinds of rock and roll and popular music as well. So, I think all these things have had influences in the music that I write and the way I play. And I've always been open to different styles and different approaches. And but I mean, just jazz is sort of has been my first love, because I started going to jazz concerts when I was quite early, and my parents would take me to the Monterey Jazz Festival, when I was very young. And so I think that's what really got me interested in wanting to play an instrument was hearing jazz, especially live.
And why the bass?
That's a good question. I started on piano when I was young, and my father plays a bit, so he taught me a little bit when I was very young, and then I took piano lessons I started piano lessons when I was maybe 6 or 7, I think, 7 years old, and then I learned some guitar later when I was doing a film with my father when I was about 13, I think, 12 or 13. But I was always I became interested in the drums, like quite early, but I couldn't convince my mother to buy me a drum set. So I picked up the bass and started kind of teaching myself the bass guitar at first. And I don't know, it just sort of came naturally to me. And I always liked the drums and bass in particular. So after I kind of started on electric bass for a year or two, I started studying and playing the contrabass, the upright acoustic bass, and I just sort of fell in love with it, really.
Yeah, bass, we connect it with the foundation, with this rhythm that is constantly going on and is moving everything further. And jazz is a tradition that evolves. So please tell us about the way you see jazz moving forward and your place in that process. You have an album with electronic music, electronic sound. You have an album that goes to the cinema. So a lot of different influences you incorporate in your music. So how do you feel about jazz moving forward and you being part of that motion?
Well, I think it's always, it always needs to keep moving forward, and there's always a lot of, always a lot of great young musicians coming up, and I think that's necessary to keep it alive and healthy, and people incorporating new styles of music into it, and I mean, I love the traditional jazz, and I love, a lot of the jazz from the 1950s and 60s, especially, but like I said, I like all kinds of music. So, I've never been like a jazz snob necessarily. I'm always open to different kinds of music and combining different kinds of music. And if it's done well and done in a musical way, I think it can be very valid, and helps move the music forward, like you said. So and I'm always, like I said, and also I think for me, always traveling and going to new countries and experiencing music from different cultures, I think has always been inspirational to me. To write something new or incorporate something new into my music.
So please tell us about the concert in Bulgaria.
I'm looking forward to it very much. I've never been to Bulgaria. This will be my very first time. So we're going to be playing. It's going to be my quintet, and we're playing pretty mostly the music, I think, from my father's films. You know, it's the last project I did was is kind of an homage to him and his career. And but I mean, it's also an homage to some of the great film composers, you know, who've worked on his films over the years. You know, like Ennio Morricone and Lalo Schifrin and John Williams. And so we'll play music from all three of those composers and from my father's films. And then also we're going to play some music that I've written for his films, and some music that my father's written for some of his films. So it's going to be primarily sort of a tribute to his film music.
And finally, because we're talking about your father and his symbol of dignity, he is a very dignified person, and that is what really just teaches us to have dignity, and this is what we badly need, especially now.
Nowadays, yeah, it seems to be, yes.
More than ever.
Yeah.
Please tell us about your father and the way he raised you and what he gave you as attitude to life and art.
Well, you know, I was fortunate enough to be exposed to a lot of music. You know, both my mother and father are big fans of music. You know, they both play and they're both big music fans, and in particular jazz fans, you know. So I grew up listening to a lot of jazz and blues and R&B music and stuff like that, and a lot of big band music, you know. So luckily I was exposed to this kind of music at an early age, and that and also we watched a lot of movies, you know, and I was, you know, got to grow up around a lot of cinema when I was very young. So those have always been my two big passions, really, was the cinema and music, you know. So there was a short time where when I was a lot younger, when I thought maybe I would try to be a film director, but by the time I was, you know, 17 or 18 years old, music had become too much, you know, a part of my life and was too strong, really. So music sort of won out over the cinema. But luckily, you know, I've been able to stay involved in the cinema a bit, you know, through film music anyway. But yeah, my father taught me, you know, to dedicate myself and to be, you know, serious and work hard at what you love, you know, and what you dedicate your life to, you know. So, I mean, he likes to have a lot of fun with it as well, and he loves what he does, you know. But you know, there's a lot of hard work involved in dedication. So, I think that's one of the most important things that he taught me, really.